So I put the steering wheel cover on after I got back from my trip to Texas. The leather steering wheel on this Lariat truck was just starting to get a little bit worn out on the top here, and I didn't like the way it felt. It felt kind of weird, and I've been seeing these leather stitch up steering wheel covers online on Amazon for a while and thought I'd try them out. I've had this on for a little over a month now, and I really like it. I like it so much I actually bought a second one to go on my Toyota 4Runner. So rather than re-stitch this one, I'll go ahead and do a video here and show you how these are installed. You do stitch them yourself. It's fairly simple, just a little bit time consuming. I did a little bit different stitch than what they recommend you do. I skipped every other stitch just to give it a different look. I kind of like the way that looks, skipping each one. So instead of going there to there, I went there to there and just skipped each one. Also made that go a lot faster. So I'll show you guys how I did it. All right, there's the package, BMLEI. So you get the leather cover and you get the instructions, and then your 2 things of thread and a couple of needles. The 2 things of thread, if you've got the 2-piece steering wheel, well, not 2-piece, but 2 sections of steering wheel, you'll want to use 2 separate thread lengths, just so you make sure you've got enough. They're pretty blunt. I don't know if that's focusing or not, but you got to apply quite a bit of pressure to get through that leather when you're making your stitch, the first stitch. And then once you're punctured through the leather and make your knot, then you go through the little stitches that are sewn into the leather itself. So you don't have to puncture it every single time with this needle, just each time that you're making a knot to secure it. The bundle of thread is about 15 feet long, so they send you plenty. You could probably stitch the whole thing if you're skipping every other stitch like I did on the Ford. You could probably do the whole wheel with one bundle of thread. But if you're going every stitch, if you're going to do some different stitch for aesthetics, some people double and they cross stitch, and they'll go back and forth just to make a really cool looking stitch. You'll need both bundles of thread. For me, on this one, I'm just going to do a simple stitch. I'm going to go every thread, every single stitch that's in the leather. I'm going to go through every single one of those. I'm not going to skip like I did on the Ford. Just want to see, just do something different, and then see what it looks like going every stitch instead of skipping. So let's go ahead and get started. Just applying the force to get the leather cover over the steering wheel is pretty tough. So I'll try to show it the best that I can. All right, so the first thing I want to do, and the first thing you're going to want to do, is make sure your steering wheel is straight. So get it straight. And I'll bring mine up a little bit, just so you've got room to work. And then on the leather steering wheel cover, find the seam, and you place that at the bottom. And you want to get it centered. If you just try to stretch it out a little bit, especially in the center, get your thumb tucked in there. That's what worked best for me. Just work all the way around, just kind of stretch it a little bit. But be mindful of where that seam is. You want that seam right at the very bottom. Once the cover is on the steering wheel, there's no turning it. It doesn't slip. So if you're off center, you got to take the whole thing off and recenter it. So starting on the bottom and making sure that that seam is right in the center, which it is. I start to work my hand up underneath the cover between the steering wheel and the leather cover on both sides, and that kind of stretches it out a little bit. Try to work it from both sides, so then it doesn't want to kick over to one side. You want to keep that seam right there in the middle. Get your hand out from under there. Start on this side. And once you got your hand on this side, it just should slip right over. Just like that. Alright, so the cover's on and we're centered. Alright, so you can see that the cover's on the wheel, and then just make sure that your seam is, you know, right on the center of the steering wheel. So just fold your cover over and make sure that both points meet in the middle. And then, you know, you can kind of make that adjustment a little bit as you go all the way around, but you don't want to start stitching and have to move it around, because then your stitch will loosen up. So a couple things to make note of when you're starting your weave of this thread. They want you to start on the for this lower part. They want you to start obviously on one end right here. The problem that I had on the Ford was the knot placement. So just make sure that when you run your knot through, you run it in some place where you don't keep your hands all the time, because it can be a little bit of annoying. All right, so take your thread, put it through the hole in the needle, equal amounts of thread on both sides. Okay. I'm going to start on this end and thread this way to here and make my knot on this back side. You might want to start on this side and run this way. It just depends on how you like to thread things. Find where one of the holes is from the thread that's existing in the leather, like right there, and that's where you're going to want to push the needle through. But make sure you don't run all the thread through, because you need to tie your knot. That's what's going to hold the thread in place to start working it all the way around. Have something that you can push on the end of this needle to puncture through the leather, because you don't want to use your thumb. It's going to hurt, and you need to apply a lot of pressure to get it through that, you know, make that first perforation. So just something, doesn't matter what it is. I'm just using the end of a crescent wrench just to, you know, kind of get some force down on that and push on it. All right, and once I've got that needle, so this needle is through, there's my doubled thread. I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I'm going to tie my knot just on one side of this thread, because my stitch doesn't require to double up this thread like I did on the Ford. So I'm going to tie my knot just on one side, pull that thread through, and that knot's going to stop, and then the other side's going to pull through like that. All right, so now that I've got that knot in there, and I've got my needle here, I can tie a knot in this end so this thread doesn't slide off the needle. I'll just double knot this one. Okay, so now I've just got the one thread stitching through instead of a dual thread. And you can go back and trim all the excess off when you're done, just with a pair of scissors. Okay, so now in the direction of the thread coming out of that hole, which is back this way. I'll get this first stitch, and then just when you're done making your stitch, just give it a little tug, just so the two ends of the leather, the seam in the center, they meet up. You don't need to wrench on it, just a little bit. And then back around. This is the time-consuming part. There's a lot of stitches. Just a little snug. That's kind of what the stitch will look like. I'll keep going. This is the time-consuming part, so I'll keep going along here, and as I go, I'll chime back in with the camera and show you what it's looking like. Okay, as we're approaching this spoke, I want to make sure that when I run my thread through this, the thread that's through the leather, when I run my stitching thread through, that I want to come back out on this side, on the face, as close to the edge as possible. So I'm going through on this one, I'll come back on this one, and then I'm going to weave the thread up through here to draw it tight down that way. Some steering wheels, the airbag, the center piece is going to be, you know, further to the edge in here, and then you can tuck this edge down. But on my Ford and on this Toyota 4Runner, it's too far that way, so I'm going to be stitching that tight. So I'll be running the thread through this stitching here, and then I'll start back on this side to get the rest of it going across. So that right there was about, probably 15 minutes. I'll keep going. All right, so as I've run my thread through here, I've got it coming out the back, or out the front side toward the back, and that way I can pull this snug. So that whole area is tight against the steering wheel spoke. Okay, so there's the end knot right there. On the inside back here. So the entire cover is stitched. We're pretty much centered there, and it feels really nice. I really like these covers. I will I'll put a link in the description below where to get these. I just buy them on Amazon. They're about $15 to $17 depending on what color stitching and like what pattern you want in the leather. Took about maybe an hour and 15 minutes for the whole thing from start to finish, so not too bad. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a good quality steering wheel cover, real leather, you know, super high quality thread, super strong stitching, that BMLEI, again, I'll leave a link in the description below. You can check it out. Just an Amazon link. It is an Amazon affiliate link, so anytime you purchase something through one of those links, you're helping out the channel. Super appreciate that. Every little bit helps. You know, I can bring products and things like that to everybody's attention that are good quality and inexpensive. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Later.